Good morning. We're waiting for a little video to run from our AV room. For those of you who haven't been here a while, we're continuing to stream while we have our live service, so we have to coordinate. Good morning. To those of you here in the sanctuary and to those of you viewing us online, I'm Raina Beck, the Worship Associate today, and I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Flint, a progressive religious community in which people are free to be themselves without fear. If you're a visitor and would like more information on our faith tradition or this congregation, please feel free to talk to our ministers today, Jerry and Lynn sitting here, or reach out to them via the contact information that may be found at uuflint.org. If you're interested in receiving our weekly email newsletter, you may sign up on our website. You can scan the QR code on the order of service, or you can complete this colorful card that you should see in the pew ahead of you. Please look at the back of the order of service for all of our announcements. However, I'd like to quickly highlight just two. Number one, there's no place like home is the theme of this month's All Member and Friend Pledge campaign. And as we focus on just what this UU home means to us, we'd like everyone to participate in one Sunday coffee hour conversation. So if you've not yet participated in one of the coffee hours, please join Sandra Murphy in Nelson Hall during the coffee hour or next Sunday to express your thoughts and feelings. There will also be a Wednesday evening Zoom discussion, and see the e-updates for details. But we are asking that you return your pledge form by March 1st to one of our ministers, to the office, or to Sandra. Or you can email your pledge amount to revlynn@uuflint.org. If you've never pledged before, but you have found your spiritual home here at UUCF, please consider a pledge of financial support, and blank pledge forms are available at the table as you exit. And another opportunity for you to speak out. Today, there will be discussion here in the sanctuary at 12:15 after we have a wonderful downstairs coffee hour with some not so healthy and wonderfully healthy snacks for you. So we're going to be talking about Sunday programming for our new year. So anyone interested in giving input is welcome to attend. That's at 12:15 today. And we forgot something last Sunday. You know, I keep saying we're an aging congregation. That's our excuse, I guess. But last Sunday was the second Sunday. For those of you who don't know, we have a tradition here called the Second Sunday Donation Program, where each year we ask you to donate and nominate, groups in the community or preferably within the state, who are nonprofits that we can choose to support. And we choose about 9 of them, 8 to 9, and we have 3 Second Sunday donations left for denominational asks. So this month, we're going to pretend it's the second Sunday. Our donation goes to 2 internal funds. One is a leadership fund for the Unitarian Universalist Church here, and the other is a memorial garden fund. And let me quickly tell you what we do. When we have members who can't afford to go to training programs, such as the upcoming Mid-America Regional Assembly, where wonderful skills can be developed for you and wonderful spiritual journeys can be supported, we try to help those folks with the registration and travel expenses. That's an example. Number 2, from our Memorial Garden Fund, we have a wonderful memorial garden. If you've never walked on our grounds, wait till spring comes, or at least the walkways are clear, and go take a look. We have many people whose ashes have been scattered for memorial plantings given, and there is a cost to that. Some persons and families cannot afford that $400 plus the price of a plant. So if you are interested in supporting either of those funds, please make a donation with whichever fund you feel you'd like your monies to go to, Memorial Fund or Leadership. And that's this month's second Sunday donation program. And now I'd like to invite Reverend Lynn forward as we light our chalice. We kindle the sacred fire as we gather in community. We're mindful of the brave souls and questing the independent minds whose courage won our freedom. And now if you will join me in reciting our covenant. Should be up on our screen. Recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service, we gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to produce goodness and justice. Amen.
Calling out around the world, are you ready for a brand new beat? Summer's here and the time is right. We're dancing in the street, they're dancing in Chicago, down in New Orleans, back in New York City. All we need is music, sweet music. There'll be music everywhere. There'll be swinging, swaying, records playing, dancing in the street. It doesn't matter what you wear, just as long as you are there. So come on, every guy, grab a girl. Everywhere around the world they'll be dancing. They're dancing in the street. It's just an invitation across the nation, a chance for folks to meet. They'll be laughing, singing, music swinging, dancing in the street. Philadelphia, PA, Baltimore and DC now. Don't forget the Motor City. All we need is music, sweet music. There'll be music everywhere. There'll be swinging, swaying, records playing, dancing in the street. It doesn't matter what you wear, just as long as you are there. So come on, every guy, grab a girl. Everywhere around the world they'll be dancing. They're dancing in the street. We're down in LA every day. They're dancing in the street. Philadelphia, PA, Baltimore and DC now. Don't forget the city. Fade it out, just like on the record.
Our opening words are from Sherry Woodbury. Welcome all who seek renewal in a weary world. Welcome all who come with love and energy to share. Welcome to those who worry for the future. Welcome each one who is grateful for today. Know that in this place, you are not alone.
please stand if willing and able. The words will be on the screen.
After our spoken meditation and silence during the musical meditation, please feel free to light candles of joys and concerns up front or in the rear of the sanctuary. And of course, you may also write your joy or concern in the books at the back, and we will print those in the electronic newsletter. Let us join in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of winter rest, help us to enjoy your peace in this quiet place. Remind us to pause during this season. Grant us awareness. Keep our gratitude fresh each day. May the songs in our heart be blessings and insights to us and to others. And may compassion always shine forth from the depths of our hearts. Let us enter into the silence. Amen, and blessed be.
Our reading this morning is a poem entitled For Malcolm, a Year After. And I should mention that people called Malcolm by his nickname Red when he was young. Compose for Red a proper verse. Adhere to foot and strict I am. Control the burst of angry words, or they might boil and break the dam. Or they might boil and overflow and drench me, drown me, drive me mad. So swear no oath, so shed no tear, and sing no song Blue Baptist sad. Evoke no image, stir no flame, and spin no yarn across the air. Make empty Anglo tea-lace words. Make them dead white and dry bone bare. Compose a verse for Malcolm man, and make it rhyme and make it prim. The verse will die, as all men do, but not the memory of him. Death might come swinging sweet like sea, or knocking, like the old folks say. The moon and stars may pass away, but not the anger of that day. A guide to naming slaves, to divest them of their individuality and their group associations, thereby dehumanizing and disempowering them. To increase one's mastery over slaves, the captor can use animal terms such as buck for men, filly for women, and shote, the term for a young pig, for children. Contempt for the male is best shown by removing his honorific attachment to fatherhood and manhood by always addressing him as boy. Females can be called wench to indicate they are low-born and promiscuous. Enslaved men can also be given classical names from history such as Virgil, Hannibal, Jupiter, Cicero, or Caesar, while women get classical names such as Venus or Diana. By using classical names, the enslaved are mocked because they could never be Caesar or a Venus. In 1952, Malcolm Little knew well how the names of black Americans had been chosen by whites to keep them in line. So the man, who grew up in Mason, Michigan, just 15 miles from Lansing, changed his last name to X. The X was a reminder to himself and to others of his stolen identity. Now, he was in full rebellion against the people and forces that for over 4 centuries had repeatedly robbed black Americans of nearly everything worth having. He had the stern, intimidating look of a hawk about to strike. And his anger at white people, who he called devils, was startling, to say the least. Compared to the calm, well-reasoned demands for civil rights from the Christian minister, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X was the bad black Muslim minister man. Most white people, and some black people, wanted him to be quiet. But now, we are very fortunate because the story of his life and the story of his rebellion has become a myth, the good kind. It has become a mythic story that teaches us how to live and to be with others. And that's a very good thing, because we live in a time when people are wondering how to best proceed to end racism in America. And it's unclear at times if we're making much progress. Malcolm's story, the story of his righteous anger, and then his religious revelation may show us the way forward. We are all in his story, and so the story is for all of us. Why was Malcolm so angry? A better informed question would be, why didn't he explode with anger? He was outrageously angry because he lived in fear for much of his young life. Even as he lay in his mother's womb in 1925, she was fending off a terrifying visit from the Ku Klux Klan when they lived near Omaha, Nebraska. The Klan was after his father, Earl, who was not an obedient Negro. But he wasn't home that night, luckily. So the Klansmen broke every window in the house with their rifle butts and then rode away. 3 of Malcolm's uncles had already been killed by white men, and Malcolm lived in the amniotic fluid of fear before and after he was born. Then in 1929, in Michigan, Malcolm's first vivid memory was the nighttime visit of the local hate society called the Black Legion. They were called the Black Legion because they wore black robes instead of the white of the Ku Klux Klan in the South. The Black Legionnaires hated Earl because he wanted to own a business in town, and because his house was not in the area allowed to blacks. Earl, standing on his porch, shot over their heads, so the Legionnaires set fire to their house. Malcolm and his pregnant mother and 4 brothers and sisters fled the house, stood in the yard in their underwear crying, with guns firing all around them. Their house quickly crashed to the ground in flames. In those days, blacks weren't allowed after dark in East Lansing, so they couldn't seek temporary shelter in the city. 35 years later, Malcolm spoke to Michigan State students in East Lansing, and as you can imagine, he mentioned these facts. He likely also mentioned that black people in those days could not work in the Lansing Oldsmobile plant or in the Lansing Rio plant either. If you were black, you could clean white people's houses, or shine their shoes, or shovel their horses' excrement, but that was about it. Earl's many jobs, one of them as a part-time preacher, paid very little, and their big garden didn't always keep them fed. 6-year-old Malcolm and his whole family often went to bed hungry. Then, in 1931, someone crushed his father's skull with a club and then laid him on the streetcar tracks where he was run over by a streetcar. Earl was so strong that he lived for nearly 3 hours. The white authorities claimed he committed suicide. And the life insurance company refused to pay. Earl had proudly kept payments up on the life insurance policy, hoping to provide for his family if he was killed by white people, which was a sad family tradition. And all of that, and much more really, is why it is amazing that Malcolm wasn't even more angry than he was. Martin Luther King, born just 4 years after Malcolm, would grow up solidly middle class in Atlanta, Georgia, with a father who was a respected, well-paid minister. Now, King experienced plenty of discrimination as a boy, but not while gunfire sounded in his ears. I should mention here that someone would ask, why would any white person try to do a service on Malcolm X and presume to be able to do the story justice? I take that question seriously. It is complicated enough to explain our own lives, let alone the life of a person who experienced things that no human being should have to experience. But I think the answer to the question may also make this service more than a history lesson. Perhaps make it useful for the cause of anti-racism, for which Malcolm fought so very hard. The idea that a person can know another person's woes is under attack in our world today. Some people like to claim that their race, their culture, their gender, their sexuality, their whatever, is too exclusive, too different for any outsider to understand even a little. But thanks to science, modern psychology, and oddly enough, a playwright from ancient Rome, we know that isn't always true. Rick Hansen, PhD, a psychologist and senior fellow at UC Berkeley, has made it his life's work to show that humans survived as a species primarily because we can empathize. He writes, empathy is in our bones. For example, infants will cry at the tape-recorded sound of other infants crying, but not at a recording of their own cries. As adults, our tear glands will automatically start producing tears when we hear the crying of others. As Charles Darwin wrote, humans evolved by following what pleasured them and made them successful, and sociability was very pleasurable to our ancient ancestors. Sociability, with empathy at the heart of it, drove evolution. After 2.5 million years and 100,000 generations, the human brain has tripled in size. Most of that growth is in the part of the brain used for language, cooperative planning, altruism, and empathy. End quote. In other words, if we humans were truly unable to understand and empathize with other human beings, we wouldn't have survived as a species. Or if we had, we would be a pretty dumb species that had to be happy that no one else understood us. Yes, we often fail disastrously at caring about another person's woes, but not because the ability isn't always within us. But luckily, there is a more poetic way to say why we want to tell Malcolm's story and do it faithfully in a way that keeps his work alive. This poetic way involves, ironically enough, a Roman slave, Terence, named after his master, a Roman senator by the name of Terence Lucanus. As with Malcolm Little, we don't know his original name or exactly where he came from. The Roman senator just gave him his own name, Terence. But the Roman senator also decided to free Terence because he was so amazingly smart and had learned to write, and to write well. Terence would go on to write 6 comedies for the Roman theater, and they were so popular, we still have them today. They were used by monasteries and convents during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and priests and nuns often learned to speak Latin through the reenactment of Terence's plays. And in one of them we find a phrase, a sentiment that many of us believe is true and perhaps helpful in ending racism. You may have heard it. It goes, "Nothing that is human is alien to me. Nothing that is human is alien to me." That would include all of the good and all of the bad that humans can be. It seems the former slave Terence arrived at what might be the perfect description of empathy over 2,000 years ago. But when Malcolm entered prison in 1945, he was not feeling at all empathetic to anyone. He had been hurt too many times. When he was 12, Malcolm had been an above-average student, always at the top of his class. So he told his white teacher, who cared for him, that he wanted to be a lawyer when he grew up. The teacher said, "No, you need to set your sights lower. Why not be a carpenter?" In effect, his teacher told him he could never be a Cicero or a Caesar. Malcolm never forgot that slight. Living with relatives moved him from city to city, Boston, Washington, D.C., and New York. Everywhere he went, he saw poor black people unable to get ahead. So they sold drugs, played the numbers, trying to make enough money to buy a car and treat their friends to dinner to prove that they were somebody. Soon Malcolm became a burglar, a hold-up man, and a drug runner. He said later that he lived and thought like a predatory animal. But this was his college, where he learned all about the worst things that can happen to people not allowed to be successful just because of the color of their skin. He was eventually caught and sent to his next college, prison. It was there that he was gifted with another byproduct of American poverty and racism, preachers who were both saviors and charlatans, peddling salvation and oftentimes hatred. In every mythic story for us to live by, there are villains who are always thought at first to be saviors. It would take Malcolm X to see them for what they were and to take them down. Wallace Fard arrived in Detroit in 1930 with an ambiguous background, 5 fake names, and taught a self-contrived form of what he said was the religion of Islam. Fard would later claim he was God and also the incarnation of the Prophet Muhammad. He knew how to gather crowds of America's most abused people and take what little money they had. He began by selling raincoats and later silks door to door in Detroit's black section. He taught that black men in North America are not Negroes, but members of the lost tribe of Shabazz. He said they were stolen by traders from the holy city of Mecca in the year 379, or rather 379 years ago, and that they were racially superior to whites who were essentially devils. He soon had a congregation of 8,000 people and a loyal disciple he called Elijah Muhammad. Fard was repeatedly thrown out of Detroit, and over the years it was learned that he was actually a tamale salesman from Oregon who went by the names of Fred Waldad, Fred the Turk, and then Fred the Greek, and had spent some time in San Quentin prison. His teaching, for all of their inaccuracies and sometimes outright lies, nevertheless carried an important message to African Americans. Be proud of yourself. Whatever else we might say of the original Nation of Islam religion, as taught by Fard and later Elijah Muhammad, it taught black Americans to be proud of themselves. Prisons were fertile ground for converting black men to become black Muslims, and there was no more adept pupil than Malcolm. Here was something that would focus his well-justified hatred for white people. Its simplicity attracted him, especially its message that whites were essentially evil, all of them. That kind of thinking has a name, essentialism, and it's a big part of any kind of racist thinking. He was in prison for 7 years, and for much of that time he corresponded with Elijah Muhammad by letter. He soon became Malcolm X, the X symbolizing the true African family name that he could never know. But prison was to be his second college. As chance would have it, the Norfolk, Massachusetts prison had received thousands of books from a college library. When the lights went out every night, Malcolm would lay on the floor of his cell and secretly continue reading by the faint glow of a corridor light bulb. He often slept only a few hours each night. He read anthropology, philosophy, history, science, and entire dictionaries. He read so much by the dim glow of the corridor light bulb that it ruined his once perfect vision. Then in 1952, he was paroled, and he went to Detroit to work in a furniture store along with his older brother. The store was owned by Jews, whom Malcolm had been taught to hate by Elijah Muhammad. But the Nation of Islam temple was nearby on Frederick Street, so he took and kept the job anyway. As the Nation of Islam grew, so did Malcolm's reputation as a potent preacher of its doctrine. By 1957, the eloquent and dashing Malcolm X was traveling to America's biggest cities to establish Nation of Islam temples. Soon he was being interviewed on TV, and he told the nation that Martin Luther King was like a tame house Negro. He said King was an Uncle Tom who did the evil white man's bidding and mistakenly thought nonviolent protests would be effective. He said repeatedly that black Americans should get their human rights by any means necessary, leading many black scholars and celebrities to denounce him for promoting violence. Then in 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated, Malcolm said publicly that this was proof that America's chickens were coming home to roost. He implied that the Nation of Islam didn't care about Kennedy, even though Kennedy was working for civil rights. There seemed no limit to his anger when he mocked the peaceful and successful March on Washington, calling it the farce on Washington. He wrote, "No sane black man really wants integration. No sane white man really wants integration. No sane black man really believes that the white man will ever give the black man anything more than token immigration." Lots of people didn't know what to do with Malcolm. His anger, the anger he had lived with his whole life, the anger that made him famous and infamous, beloved by his followers and hated by his opponents, that anger burned so hot that it finally burned away everything from his past. Soon, he would be on a new path. Elijah Muhammad was jealous of Malcolm's popularity and angry that he spoke ill of the assassinated president, even though he had been ordered to be quiet about that. Malcolm's respect for Elijah Muhammad started to wane. He had heard rumors that Elijah Muhammad was not as holy as he made out to be. Then Malcolm learned that his leader had 8 children with 6 different teenage girls. Elijah Muhammad confirmed the rumors, attempting to justify his behavior by saying the biblical prophets did the same thing. In a religion that prized purity and obedience above all things, there was no room for forgiveness in Malcolm. He called Elijah Muhammad a faker and set out on his own, looking for another way to help black Americans. Whatever Malcolm's faults may have been, no one was more dedicated to the fight for justice. In 1964, Malcolm X went on the Hajj, the Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca that had been going on annually for the last 1,400 years. It wasn't an impulsive decision. Often during his time as a minister for the Nation of Islam, traditional Muslims would approach him and urge him to do the pilgrimage and learn about the Islam of history, not the Islam of Wallace Fard. Then one day in New York, he met a professor of Islam, Dr. Schwarby, from the University of Cairo. They talked for a while, and the conversation turned to the topic of brotherhood. And Dr. Schwarby said, "No man has believed perfectly until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. No man has believed perfectly until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself." It was then that Malcolm decided he should go on the Hajj to learn more about Islam. I suppose it is understandable that creatures who evolved to love sociability and to be empathetic would naturally be transformed by the experience of the Hajj. In his now famous Letter from the Hajj, Malcolm, now known as El Hajj Malik el-Shabazz, or the Pilgrim Malcolm, the King. He wrote, "Never have I witnessed such sincere hospitality, an overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood as it is practiced by people of all colors and races here in this ancient Holy Land. For the past week I have been utterly speechless and spellbound by the graciousness I see displayed all around me by people of all colors, from blue-eyed blondes to black-skinned Africans. But we were all participating in the same ritual, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood that my experiences in America had led me to believe could never exist between white and non-white. We all ate as one and slept as one. Everything about the pilgrimage atmosphere accented the oneness of man under God." And then he quoted the Muslim holy book known as the Hadith. By Allah, you will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. It seems safe to say Malcolm realized that nothing that is human was alien to himself. That in spite of our many differences, we are essentially the same. All of the good, all of the bad, and we are much more alike than we are different. 3 days before he was assassinated, he wrote, "The true brotherhood I have seen has influenced me to recognize that anger can blind human vision. It is a time for martyrs now. And if I am to be one, it will be for the cause of brotherhood. That's the only thing that can save this country." Thank you.
We say in this church that an offering is the sacrament of the free church. What we mean by that is that we believe it is a blessing to be able to govern and support a religious community that belongs to all of us. To make possible by our generosity everything we dream of or do to live out shared values. So I invite you to consider a donation to this community. We take our collection by asking you to place an offering at the basket at the back of the church as you leave, buy an online gift at Flint. And whatever you give, time, talent, or monetary support, they're all welcome. All of us are needed here in many ways. Thank you.
Our closing words are those of Malcolm X. There is no better teacher than adversity. Every defeat, every heartbreak, every loss contains its own seed, its own lesson on how to improve. And let us extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry on our heart until we are together again.
Welcome to your life. There's no turning back. Even while you sleep, we will find you acting on your best behavior. Turn your back on Mother Nature. Everybody wants to rule the world. It's my own design. It's my own remorse. Help me to decide. Help me make the most of freedom and of pleasure. Nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule the world. There's a room where the light won't find you. Holding hands while the walls come tumbling down. When staring with a lack of vision. Everybody wants to rule the world. Say that you never, 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 never need it. One headline, why believe it? Everybody wants to rule the world. All for freedom and for pleasure. Nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody